The offseason's all about making adjustments on our team and preparing for the next coming season. But who are some guys that you should be looking at to acquire in trades right now? Hey Headliner Nation, welcome into another episode of the Fantasy Headliners. Kyle joining you again. Been doing a lot of fantasy baseball stuff, but doing some fantasy football today, specifically talking about 2019 offseason trade targets. Now, this is going to be basically for Dynasty owners, Devy owners, people who are still in the thick of fantasy football right now because there is no offseason in Dynasty leagues. But even if you're a redraft owner, keep some of this information in mind. It could come handy when you start drafting. Either way it goes, got some great information. I've got 5 targets for you today. Guys that you should be taking a look at this coming offseason to try and acquire them before the season gets here. Let's start jumping into it right now. Rashad Penny is going to be my first one, running back from the Seattle Seahawks, averaging 4.93 yards per attempt and 8.33 yards per reception last season. Some decent numbers. Too bad he didn't get a larger workload, but we know that Chris Carson is there. But honestly, Rashad Penny is a better running back than Chris Carson. Chris Carson did fabulous last year. I have nothing against Chris Carson. I wish they were on separate teams so they both could get their fair share, but that's not how it's going to work. But with the first round draft pick, you have to assume that at some point in time, Seattle's going to say, we need to see what we have here. We need to see what we spent this first round pick on, and they're going to give him more and more looks as the season goes on. This could be that season. From week 4 on, keep in mind that Rashad Penny had some injury issues in the preseason. Maybe took a little bit of while to really get healthy again, but from week 4 on, Penny averaged 6.69 yards per attempt in games in which he had at least 7 carries. So it's very possible that Rashad Penny is going to be running one of those running backs that takes a few carries to get going, doesn't necessarily start right away. So if you can give him anywhere to 7 to 10 carries, that point, then he starts moving and gets a lot better. So let's hope that if he does get a shot, that they are giving him that volume on a game-by-game basis. Again, first-round draft capital, a guy that they spent, they could have made a lot of other moves in the first round. They decided to draft a running back. Didn't get a whole lot of work last season. I think this season we will see that go up a little bit, and then it could go in even further after that. But we need to acquire him now if it does start this season. Number 2 is going to be Kenyan Drake, running back for the Miami Dolphins. And believe it or not, in PPR leagues last year, Kenyan Drake still clocked in as the running back 14. For as inconsistent as his season was, he ended up actually putting together a pretty decent season. Now, I was off Kenyan Drake last offseason. I told you, don't do it. Don't go near him. He's not going to give you the same production we saw in 2017. Well, then they went and signed Frank Gore. Then I said, now we really need to be worried. Now you really need to be getting away from this guy. He did well in the passing game. He just couldn't outwork Frank Gore on the ground, and that ended up being an issue with him. But he did have his lowest yards per attempt of his career this past season. It was still 4.5, which is good. But he had his highest yards per reception. He averaged 9 yards per reception last season. 9 total touchdowns, nothing to scoff at either. He had a nose for the end zone, which is great. There's no more Frank Gore, so just mention it again, but we don't have to worry about Frank Gore anymore as well. And they have a new coaching staff. They're probably going to have a new quarterback that might be on the younger side. If that happens, they really might need to look at Kenyan Drake and say, hey, we need to lean on you. You're going to be the guy. Him paired with Kellen Ballage, they could end up actually pairing up together to be a pretty formidable duo in the backfield if whoever this quarterback is can do just enough to keep everybody from jumping up into the box and just focusing on the run game. Moving on to the next position now, wide receiver Allen Robinson from the Chicago Bears. This was another guy, too, that I warned owners about last offseason because there was a lot of concerns that I had with him. He had the year off. Obviously, he had the injury that he had to come back from, the ACL injury. He was going to be working with a new, young, inconsistent quarterback. What was that going to look like? And then also a new system. There was a new system being put in place in Chicago. He was going to have to learn a new system as well. Just a lot of red flags, a lot of things that I didn't like that could potentially cause for some up and downs, and that's what it was. The good news is that he averaged at least 11 yards per reception in 10 of his 13 games. Obviously, we want to see a little bit better, but it could have been a lot worse. It could have been a lot worse. Inconsistency were the issues. I think we'll see less inconsistencies in 2019. But it really boils down to how much do you trust Mitchell Trubisky. If you really trust him and you really like him, then you really need to be buying Allen Robinson. Regardless, though, I think Mitchell Trubisky will end up being just good enough to give Allen Robinson his fair share. So we are going to be buying him as much as possible. Coming up next, wide receiver from the New York Jets, Quincy Enunwa, one of my favorite guys heading into last season, kind of a sleeper late round guy that I was looking at and told a lot of people to take a look at as well. Had a strong start to the season. Now that was lost because of some injuries, some inconsistencies later in the season. Also kind of been lost at this point because of Robbie Anderson. Robbie Anderson finished the season very strong. Made us forget about Quincy Enunwa a little bit, but I'm here to make sure that you don't forget about him. During the first 4 weeks of the season, Enunwa had 38 targets, 21 catches, 278 yards. Sam Darnold also showed massive improvements. He looked good at the start of the season, had issues in the middle, looked good at the very end. That's good news for Robbie Anderson. It's good news for Quincy Enunwa. And if the Jets do go all in and sign a guy like Le'Veon Bell being such a dynamic pass catcher, if he's not 260 pounds, if he turns out to be as good as he has been, then he's really going to help take the pressure off those intermediate routes that Quincy Enunwa is going to be running out of the slot. He does a lot of good things. He's a big-bodied receiver, but he runs well. He runs his routes very well. I like him to bounce back this season if that offense takes the next step. He could be pretty cheap right now as well, so take a look at him. Vance McDonald is going to be my tight end to buy right now. The top 3 players in yards after the catch per reception last season were all tight ends. Kittle, Ingram, and then our boy, Vance McDonald. Averaged 7.9 yards after the catch per reception last season, 3rd best in the NFL. 3rd on the Steelers with 72 targets. And then if Antonio Brown leaves, that's another 168 targets that are going to free up. Obviously, James Washington is going to get some of those. Maybe Juju ends up seeing a little bit more as well. He was pretty close in targets to Antonio Brown anyway, so he could see a little bit of an uptick, but I think Vance McDonald also is going to see a nice uptick if and when Antonio Brown is gone. Tight end is such a thin position. He's easily going to be a top 10 tight end for me. I definitely think he is a tight end 1 next season, but if Antonio Brown leaves, I think this is a guy that could approach tight end 5 overall. So keep an eye on him, get a hold of him. Also remember, Jesse James, he's out of Pittsburgh, so he doesn't have a whole lot to compete with right now at the position. Ladies and gentlemen, that's just 5 targets that I have for you right now for you Dynasty owners. Again, redraft owners, if you're interested in these guys as well, keep this information in the back of your mind come next draft season when you're ready to start jumping on them as maybe some decent picks later in the later rounds of your drafts. Thanks so much for tuning in. Keep in mind, use the comment section below if there's anybody that you have questions about, if you need any more information on these guys or any questions about these guys. Share your thoughts and opinions below. We're one of the most interactive fantasy sports channels here on YouTube. We will get back to you. Make sure you like the video as well, and please subscribe to the channel. If you're new to Headliner Nation and you're just subscribing, let us know below so we can welcome you to Headliner Nation. Thanks so much again for tuning into this episode, and we will catch you on the next one. Have a good one, everyone.